Welcome to another presentation on the dictionary series of Foundational Black Britons, or FBBs. My name is Dr. Marie Charles. As I continue today drawing upon the last presentation on the foundational wealth of England and their related foundational developments, just before I begin, I would like to thank those loyal readers of my research, and I won't mention those individuals. A lot of people like to remain private and I don't want to embarrass anybody, but you know who you are because you send me email communications on a regular basis from France, America, the USA. But sadly, with light there always comes a little bit of shade, and I have to talk about the individuals who are plagiarizing my work. And they are here now, lurking and hiding in the shadows, refashioning and reworking my evidence by removing the progenitor to produce books on particular locations, by raiding my references into a media res vacuum. In the commercial world, they're called cheetah brands, as they ride on the coattails of the original source without giving credit. Just recently, the great historian Dr. Molefe Asante spoke about this growing phenomenon. And so the gold on the opening slide from Ireland is, of course, part of this narrative on the foundational wealth of England and, of course, the British Isles as we move through into Cornwall and Devon and those surrounding counties. Because Ireland is so very, very important in terms of its foundational wealth. And that gold nugget on the opening slide is, of course, related to that beautiful gold boat, which, again, is from Ireland. We have the textual evidence to support this abundance of gold in Ireland. And this is from an 1861 text in which he talks about these incredible gold hoards that were found in Limerick and Ennis. And he says, quote, that a fierce scramble ensued on discovery of the gold. And an incredible quantity of this precious deposit was exhumed. And the Reverend Dr. Neligan of Cork, one of the first scientific strangers who obtained a sight of this large treasure, told me about this. A day or two after the matter was reported to me, I hurried to Limerick, where I heard that large quantities of gold were disposed of. Does that sound familiar? And I hurried to Limerick, where I heard that I might be able to procure some for my late friend, as though these were freebies. So I was told the quantity of gold were in wheelbarrows being carted off. Men and women were seen with hats full and aprons laden of it. And that is on page 29. I mean, that is just incredible for the amount of gold then that was being reported 200 years ago. That, of course, was the foundational wealth of Ireland. And we can even look at the material culture of those beautiful artifacts from Ireland in issue 5. But as we move across to those exquisite silk and gold vestments from Iceland, 12th century Iceland, we know that those melanated bishops and priests and abbots were originally from Ireland. And of course you can read about that in issue 6, page 34, and Jar Marson's 2012 work, research, he talks about that they sailed in their boats, the Irish monks and abbots, and they were the first settlers in Iceland. If we just take a minute, because I get very excited. I know you can't tell, but I do get very, very excited about the material culture of our ancestors. This is over 800 years old, those particular vestments, and their beauty is still evident. I mean, they are exquisite because they understood the power of gold. They understood its permanence, if you like, as a precious metal. And it's here for us to see now in 2025 of their magnificence. Now, it's very interesting that a lot of these researchers, particularly from Iceland, they seem to completely ignore the fact that these are black bishops on these ancient vestments from Ireland that would then influence Iceland. It's very interesting. And so as we move over to the center image, I want the audience to pick up the particular theme that I'm pushing today, that the wealth and the foundation of England, Ireland, the British Isles, is not just about those precious metals in the gold and silver. They would come with lots of foundational wealth in other areas, and I will pick up on a few of them today. But the Royal Borough of Oxfordshire, this is where this particular carved wooden figure is from. And just incidentally, through the power, well, it's not incidental, it's a pretty major methodological key, that through onomastics, which are the people, the places and their names, which is a major strand of my research, Oxfordshire is the royal region where King Richard I and his brother King John were born. And of course I document their foundational black images in the dictionary. We also have this royal borough minting its own gold and silver, but I'd just like you to have a little look at the figure and what I'm presuming it's a she. I mean, her face, it doesn't need any description, but just look at her hands. Her hands are in a physical posture or iteration which is very suggestive on the knees of a ritual prayer in Islam or the Raka. I mean, I'm not an expert in those particular physical postures, but you can see that it's very, very pronounced. And she's been carved with tremendous care and attention. And the masons, the carpenters, they want you to know that she's in this particular physical posture for a reason. And so as we move to the bottom figure, this is another area of spiritual excellence, and it is the face of the FBB prioress from Blithburgh in Suffolk. Suffolk, or Sufi folk, are another set of ancient people that I record and document in issue 18. But even the name itself, Blithburgh, and we look at Berg itself within that compound structure, it is another FBB name onomastically, and of course it's documented in the dictionary. But her face is exquisite. She's been beautifully portrayed on an ancient seal, hundreds and hundreds of years old, and you will see the full size of it so that you can appreciate the skill and artistry that has gone into designing this particular seal. but it's another region rich in gold, and it's a royal region. So for example, if I go to page 33, it says in this particular region where she is from, Suffolk, Blithberg, that they were called vills, and they were centres of royal administration, and they were visited by the kings and their entourages on regular circuits of the kingdom, when food rents which had to be rendered at the royal vill would be consumed. This is the work of York, and he documents this. And so another royal region on the southern parts of Britain, the evidence is there for us to observe and read and document. Now, if we look across over to the dictionary series, of course, that main image is the Coopers. The Coopers were an elite FBB family that owned vast estates and land. You will see that documented in the dictionary. But I just want to read an example from the dictionary series. And it's very, very interesting, because once you go down one path, it starts to lead you into all other notable individuals who start to reframe our understanding of the FBBs. Now, there was a tremendous amount of monasteries and abbeys and priories set up across the whole of the British Isles and Ireland, and we know that. But to go into the micro detail, which is part of a lot of this onomastic work, we find out some very interesting facts about the individuals, not only what they look like as we rescue their physical appearance, but also about the wealth and the foundational aspects of what they would lay down. If we go to a place called Shropshire, we find the most beautiful seal of Saint Milburga, and she was the abbess of this particular abbey, and you will see her beautiful image on page 125 in the dictionary series. She's been carved with such care and attention that you cannot miss her phenotype. But what I found interesting was the wealth aspect and also the connections to other royal members. So, for example, this is the work of Dudley, and he says the surviving priory ruins still convey a vivid impression of charm and majesty of what was the most wealthiest and magnificent of the religious houses of Shropshire. Now this is Lewis's work of 1845, and he says, having been destroyed by the Danes, it was restored by Leofric, Earl of Mercia, in the time of Edward the Confessor, after which it fell into decay and needed to be rebuilt and repaired. Now, as I go, I'm going to miss little bits out there, but I'd like you to read it in full. The 15th century value of the priory or monastery was the equivalent of almost £2 million today. Now that's an incredible figure, as I'm talking about one monastery, and there were, I want to say hundreds, but we're talking thousands that were literally mapped out across the whole terrain of the British Isles. But let's just go back to two names that were mentioned there. Leofric, as research shows, was the friend of Edward the Confessor. We know that Edward the Confessor was a foundational Black Briton because it's documented in the dictionary from a 12th century painting. We also know that Leofric, his wife, was Lady Godiva. Now, what is the first image that comes into your head of Lady Godiva as a later European when we know that she wasn't? And so this is what onomastics does. It forces you to drill into individuals, the places, the names, and of course once you have the primary source evidence, it's very difficult to place a later European in that position. So for example, when we think of the mainstream encyclopedia that rhymes with Wikipedia, it's replete with reconstructed images that nobody critiques. Now, why is it that nobody critiques that? Nobody is saying, but these images are reconstructed. They're not drawn from primary source evidence. Well, we kind of know the answer, but I would just like to read this quote because it kind of puts it all into perspective. It does for me as a researcher anyway. When I talk about later Europeans, we have a quote here from, this is from Critias. He's the Greek Athenian who was a student of Socrates. And he's discussing calculations and genealogy of time. And he says, whereupon one of the priests, Kemetic priests, a prodigiously old man, said, "O Solon, Solon, you Greeks are always children. There is not such a thing as an old Greek." And on hearing this, he asked, "What do you mean by this?" And the Kemetic priest replied, "You are young in soul, every one of you, for therein you possess not a single belief that is ancient and derived from old tradition, nor yet one science that is hoary with age." And so you see, that really does encapsulate later Europeans that are the children who have taken over the parents' house. We use that piece of history, that very important quote from the ancient Kemites, to talk about later Europeans, and we apply it here as we're talking about FBBs, that we should be questioning that mainstream encyclopedia that bombards our children and the minds of our young with falsified images of royalty, of bishops, of earls, of all of those leading figures who were the foundations of Britain. And this is what the dictionary series is doing. It is reframing our minds to place the original FBBs into their correct position. So, for example, the wealth of Britain is not only tied to the gold. The wealth of Britain is inextricably tied to those bishops, those abbots, those nuns who created the first centres of learning. And they would then go on to become our highest universities across the land. Let me give you a quick example. John Balliol and his wife Dergovilla founded Oxford's oldest college, Balliol College. And of course I document that in part 2. I was going to read it out, but I think I've probably spent too much time on that particular aspect. But we also have in the dictionary series Cambridge, its foundational black origins. We know that Henry I, who is the son of William Conqueror, he creates the first charter for Cambridge. And I'm now working on at least another 20 universities that have this very, very early foundational origin with the FBs, who are the bishops that you see here, the abbots, the nuns that you see here, that will create that intellectual wealth and foundation of England. And so it's a very, very quick presentation today, but I hope that I have laid out some of that reframing, which is very, very important. And I hope that you are inspired to delve deeper into part 2 of the dictionary series.